Welcome to the Maintainable Software Podcast, where we explore the art of improving existing software with seasoned practitioners who have helped organizations work past the problems often associated with technical debt and legacy code. I'm your host, Robby Russell. On this episode, Marc Cornellà, who is an official maintainer and major contributor for the Oh My Zsh project. Marc joins us today from Barcelona, Spain. Marc Cornellà, welcome to Maintainable.
Hi, Robby. Thank you.
So, Marc, as you reflect on your experience in this industry, what do you believe are a few common characteristics of, dare I say, well-maintained software?
Well, thanks for the question. I didn't expect it. I feel like we have to define what well-maintained means, because obviously if software is perfect, then it doesn't need to be maintained, and that's not considered well-maintained. I mean, it works and it's nice to make changes, but that's not something you do this unless you're code or something. I think that well-maintained software is like a project that you continuously maintain every time that you make a change. So the next time that you have to make changes, you see like, what is this code doing, even though you wrote it? So you say, I'm gonna make a comment, and the next time that you go there, you read the comment and you say, yeah, that's what it does. So you do all these things. You make comments, you refactor code that is repeated, and all of these maintenance changes. That means that you get the code to a better state. So yeah, that's my long-winded answer.
I know that you work quite a bit in open source, and we're going to dive into some of that for sure. And I'm curious, do you feel like that perspective applies? It doesn't matter whether or not it's like a company's internal proprietary software project versus an open source software project. Does it feel like that's a kind of like a shared, or do you see any major differences there around what it is to be considered a well-maintained piece of software?
Well, I feel that the baseline is on another level. Like, internal code doesn't need to be super clean, super polished, because it's just for the few people in the team that are gonna use it and edit it and write it. I think that's a very common problem that companies have when having to open source something, that they have to make it clear, make it clean, and allow other eyes to see it and understand it better. Yeah, that's a different standard for open source software that needs to be more clean and polished than internal code.
You mentioned there's more eyes on it. Do you feel like that's because it's more of the benefits of that piece of software or that project can be used by people or understood by people, or is it because you're putting that out there and the vulnerability of like other people seeing it and worrying about like the critique you're going to get from someone that comes across your code and says, this is wrong, you're doing it wrong, Marc?
Yeah, that's definitely a part that you're open to criticism. Also, I think there's the other side that proprietary code needs to meet a certain schedule, and you need to get features out the door, and then you take a lot of shortcuts. And this is not something that you have in open source projects, at least on the amateur ones. I want to say amateur, but that's not because there are open source projects that are backed by huge companies, and those are also directed by a project manager or wherever. That's a part of it, that you have to polish things before you put it out there, and you have the capability to do so.
I'm out of curiosity, Marc, how long ago did you start contributing to open source projects?
Well, the first time I contributed to a project was in 2011 with a project for the university that doesn't matter, but it generated schedules for new students. Yeah, that was a small thing. And then my major contribution to open source was starting on 2015 to Oh My Zsh, of course. So I've been there 7 years.
Okay, nice. And for those listening who might not be familiar with Oh My Zsh, what is it?
That's a good question. So Oh My Zsh is a framework for your shell, in this case Z shell, which is different from Bash, but it's similar. What it allows is to install and use different themes. You can personalize the look and feel of your terminal, and you can plug in functionality for other projects that you use regularly on the terminal, like programming language or a particular tool for systems administration, Kubernetes, all of these things. And there's like 200 plus plugins at the moment, close to 100 themes. And the good thing about it is that you can also use other things, other themes and plugins from other projects. It doesn't need to be all on my C shell.
Do you need to be how advanced of a hacker do you need to be to use Oh My Zsh?
Oh, that's a good question. Actually, not much. You can install it the first thing you do when you get a Mac because it already has Z shell. You run this little installer. When it finishes, you get a nice looking theme, the ability to enable other plugins, and you just read the documentation, and it's really not difficult.
Hmm. Interesting. And so, why would I want to, as a developer? I'm I'm coding in like VS Code, or sometimes like people on my team tell me actually, oh, you want us like you can use like Git on the command line. Is that something you can use with Oh My Zsh?
Yeah, and you can do more than that. You can run Mercurial if you want. It's not the most chosen path, but yeah, SVN, which is also used by some projects. Well, you can program in Python if you like having neat dependency management. You can use virtualenv. You can do all these things, and you can even write it from within VS Code because it has a terminal. So
Oh, right, that's right. Was pairing with a coworker recently, and they had like a little black box thing that would show up, and I could type. They were typing into it when we were pairing, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I run git commit messages here, open up things." So, do you have a favorite font for your terminal?
yeah, I'm a Cascadia Code fan, which is by Microsoft.
So it's actually the mountain range. Well, there's a couple of things. It's an area of so you're in as I mentioned in the intro, you're in Spain in Barcelona, right? And so I live in the Pacific Northwest in the United States. So it's like Microsoft's headquarters is like a couple hundred miles north of us. For context, maybe 150 miles to 200 miles, give or take, up by Seattle. And I live further south in Portland. But the Pacific Northwest area, there's a mountain range, and it goes but they call this region. There's like we have a Cascadia mountain range. It's a series of volcanoes that goes from like up the Pacific, like north of California. So you've got there's volcanoes in Oregon and Washington and in British Columbia, which is in Canada. So that area is called we call it the Cascadia region. It's kind of like it's like a regional thing, and I'm a soccer fan, football for everybody that's not in the United States. We have like a Cascadia Cup. So Cascadia becomes like a thing we talk about. We have a flag for Cascadia for the region. So it's like in a region, and there's been a lot of like conversations over the years. Nothing like super serious, but like us seceding from like this area becoming its own country at some point. So it's like so Cascadia is actually like a regional thing. We have a flag with a tree in it. I'll show you the so the font. Anyways, is named after that area.
Nice. Then I'll use it more.
I think I had Cascadia installed on a previous laptop, and I just looked right now, and it looks like I'm set up to use Menlo right now. So I should go back and download that again. All right, we're going down a weird path here, Mark. I think we should let's get back. I apologize to everybody listening. So you have all these themes. Like, what's the default theme? Do they all have like cool names?
Yeah, actually the default theme is called Robbie Russell for some reason. I don't recall why that is.
Wow. So let's talk a little bit more about you've been working on the Oh My Zsh project since 2015, and so this is for anyone listening. This is 2022, 7 years later. Projects like Oh My Zsh consistently have, let's say, a steady pace of probably 400 to 500 open pull requests at any given time from lots of contributors. Right? That's probably not just a few people that are core maintainers of the project that are creating all those pull requests. This is coming from a wide range of people and contributors. What are some effective strategies that you found to organize and like triage all of that?
So you're right, we have a lot of pull requests and we enjoy all of them, I want to say. What I've been doing over the years, or what we've been doing over the years, is to find a way to categorize them by some metric. Like, for example, at the beginning, we didn't have any labels and we didn't have a way to say, I want to do all of this right now. I have time and I want to say, I'll focus on this particular plugin. Like, for example, the Git plugin receives a lot of PRs, pull requests. And so what I would do is I would make a ad hoc search for the plugin, and that could generate PRs from things that weren't for the Git plugin. So one iteration over that basic approach was to download all of the PRs, see what the files they changed, and say if these files are all within this same plugin, say this PR is for this plugin. And with that, I would do it manually and not run it like each week or something, and then say which are the PRs with most PRs, the plugins with most PRs, and say I'm gonna make an effort to like get out all of this in one sitting. And then we adapted that to make labels. We added a bot, and now with the new projects beta or GitHub issues beta from GitHub, you can say the specific field for each issue and say this PR is for this plugin, and then you have a nice UI. You can filter. This is a table. This is a Kanban board. You can move PRs from one state to another. You can assign them and move to a different iteration. And so that's the current state of the project. Like it's become more project managed. Yeah, that's the current method to manage all of these PRs. And I feel like I missed something, but yeah, you can ask, and I'll talk about a particular section of this.
One of the things that I can imagine is that with people contributing, like so many people, like I don't remember what the number of contributors right now. So it's over 2,000 people right now that have had code contributed and accepted by the project into it. So that's a lot of people, a lot of code, and I'm assuming that not everybody that sends a PR has their PRs get accepted. For those listening that might feel like, oh great, it's nice, people are spending some of their time contributing some ideas, whether it be a new plugin or maybe some new or adding to an existing plugin. And what happens in the scenario where you're like, this doesn't quite fit, this doesn't work for us. We don't. How do you go about declining or rejecting or saying no to people? Do you have any advice for people out there that might feel like, oh, I don't want to tell people no and be mean, but how do you navigate that?
So we don't really have a policy for this particular issue, even though it's the most common one. A lot of the PRs we get are for specific aliases. Like aliases are things where you can shorten a command and you, instead of running, I don't know, git commit dash m and your message, you can shorten that and say GCMS or GCMSG, I think, and you save keystrokes. But the problem with that is that it's really specific to each particular user and workflow. And so there are a lot of PRs that don't get prioritized because they don't necessarily add to the rest of the users. Like maybe you're gonna use this a lot, but that's an edge case. And so what we do with these things is we don't prioritize them, and sometimes they close themselves, and sometimes we have to say no, we're not gonna do this because it doesn't seem worth it for the rest of the users. But I feel like we can do this better. Like especially if we document all of our decisions and make it into a policy, that's gonna be a lot more easy to say, hey, that's documented here. For this case and this other case, then that's not possible. You can like fork it or make your own plugin, or you can even set this in your own file. Like it's not really difficult to do that. So yeah, I think that my best suggestion is to document all of your decisions, make them policies, and then that's like gonna enable you to close a lot of issues.
We'll be back with our interview with Marc in just a moment. Hi, it's me, Robby. I just wanted to take a quick moment to thank you for making time to listen to the Maintainable Software Podcast. If you're finding these conversations valuable, please consider rating us on Apple Podcasts with a 5-star or a 2-star or 1-star, depending on how you're feeling at the moment. It'd be awesome. The more we get of that, the more things pop up in things. And I think you can rate us now on Spotify as well. Also, is there anyone that you think I should be interviewing on Maintainable? Shoot me an email to Robby with a Y at maintainable.fm. And now let's get back to our interview with Marc Cornellà. I talk with a lot of people on the show about the importance of like automated tests. And in this terminal world, is there much tooling out there that you can lean on to, I don't know if we're able to test the behavior of everything, but at least like what sort of things can you do to help with the quality control as things are being sent in? Is there anything that happens before you even look at a PR that you're able to automate?
Yeah, so that's an issue with the project because it supports a lot of different environments and configurations. The easiest path would be to add a test when you support something. Like, for example, there is a plugin that loads some tool for every available distribution or platform like macOS or Ubuntu or what have you. The way to test that would be to run that on that particular system, and that's not feasible for our project. What you can do though is what you do with functional testing, you extract logic and you test that logic. That's possible to do. Like there are a lot of projects that have testing for that. That kind of thing is not that useful for us because we don't really have a lot of logic. We have particular behaviors that adapt to the environment. So if this file is present, do this. If this file is not present, do that. And that's not really useful to test. So yeah, that's kind of a bummer, but yeah, that's how it is.
What are some of the big picture plans and goals for like going forward with Oh My Zsh?
So I'm gonna I'm gonna say this myself, not speaking for the project, but I would like to have a way to like undo all of the things that I said previously, because I've been working with this code base for 7 years, and there are a lot of issues that have been made and a lot of PRs. And I've seen that even though there are most of the things are untestable, there are some logics or behaviors that are being repeated. And one of the things I would like to do this year is to create a kind of like an API for plugins so that they can leverage common code base that can then be tested and then make more complex behavior. Like, for example, we don't do a lot of async, and this is a lot of super advanced, but we don't do a lot of async logic. So your themes normally run synchronously with your changes, and that's an issue with, for example, the Git prompt, because it has to read all of the state of your repository, and some Git repositories are super big, like for example the Linux kernel or some Google projects or all these things. And yeah, that having that API or common logic would enable us to implement this in a much more straightforward fashion and super clean. Like I would love to see that.
I'm curious, they're taking a quick step back as well. Like, how, for you, Mark, how has working on a project like Oh My Zsh impacted your life?
All good ways. Like I've met a lot of awesome people. I've grown up into this project. Like I feel like I've matured as a person and as a developer. I've learned soft skills which are super important. I've been able to touch a lot of people's machines. Like that's a weird way to put it, but my code has been in a lot of people's machines, and that brings me some satisfaction at the end of the day. Yeah.
I think one of the fun things about open source projects, it's hard to get a good gauge. Like, we don't know how many people's machines you're probably, you've touched, but I know a lot of people use Oh My Zsh. There's not like a way to capture all of that. We can only get a sense of like how many people have forked the project, or how many people have started it on GitHub, or follow it on Twitter, and a subset of some higher number that we may never know, right? And so I know it's pretty awesome. I was at a conference recently about a month ago, and it seemed like a lot of people knew what Oh My Zsh there was, and that's pretty awesome to be like, I know Mark. Mark works on Oh My Zsh. You should talk to him. I should have him on Maintainable at some point, since he does such a great job maintaining Oh My Zsh. It's also Maintainer Month, I think, for GitHub. So I know that they're doing a bunch of things. Did you get a chance to attend the few day event that they put on?
Yeah, I did. Got a lot of very positive, actionable feedback for the project. And more than that, I saw that a lot of maintainers are struggling with the same things, and we have the same challenges, and we can give help to each other and talk through things that open source projects are going through, and that's awesome for GitHub to do that.
Curious if there was one action item that you feel like you're going to be able to try to experiment with, like, that came out of that.
So yeah, that's the part about doing policies and documenting your decisions. That's for the most part that came out of there. Also, a way to like some directed feedback for me, but like not directly at me, but like I felt called out that I was putting myself into a lot of decisions that make me a single point of failure. And yeah, that call out was necessary, and I'm gonna try to change that, like document what I'm doing. For the most part, was all good things. Yeah, I enjoyed it.
All right. So for those listening, I mean, I'm not unfamiliar with Oh My Zsh, so I'm just gonna admit that. But Marc does most of the heavy lifting on Oh My Zsh, and but you were the first person that, as me as an open source maintainer, that I felt like, oh, I can bring someone else and like give you the keys and be like, here, keep do more than I can do, because I definitely have capacity constraints. And how do you maintain your own capacity to feel motivated sometimes to keep working on it or to get into it, because it can be daunting to look at that many open points. I know you've found ways of organizing it, but how do you find the drive to keep wanting to work on it?
So there are two things that I do with how I engage with the project. One is by knowing that I have this responsibility. If I don't attend my emails and the comments, then that's not gonna get merged, that's not gonna get fixed. You have the keys, so you should use them. That's the part of me that is nagging me to do the things. And then the other part is the challenges that I see. For them, I have intrinsic motivation. Like when I see something that is a technical challenge, I want to say, if I have the time, I will get into it and maybe spend 2 hours and get someplace. But for the most part, there are obligations, but in the good sense. Like I like doing that.
Just being open with the audience is always just something I'm curious about, is like, do people feel like they're trapped in this thing, or do they still find a lot of joy in it? And it's a hard thing to know after, a number of years and stuff like that. So this, I think, admittedly, like, I was thinking about, you mentioned 7 years now that we've been collaborating in on this, and we have other people that are contributing, and a couple thousand people have contributed code, so it's not like it's just you. It's been one of my longer working relationships with anybody, so I can't believe it's 7 years. So it felt right to have this. We were like, we should spend some time talking about this on the podcast at some point. So thank you, Marc.
Yeah, and we got there.
With that, is there a non-software, non-coding, non-technical book that you find yourself recommending to people on a regular basis that you feel like is helpful for software engineers?
Yeah, actually, that's a really easy question to answer. Um, I really enjoyed this book by Tavia Butler. Actually, it's a trilogy, but the third book wasn't written. And the first part is called, I don't know the translation in English. What is this? The sower something?
The Parable of the Sower.
Sour? Yeah, and the parable of the talents, which is the second part. Yeah, it's kind of sci-fi meets the Handmaid's Tale, but it was first, so I don't know. It really was an easy read, and I really enjoyed it, and I hope they make a TV show of it.
Hmm. All right, I'll definitely include links to that in the show notes for people. I hadn't heard of that one before. That sounds interesting. Cool. And for those listening, where can folks follow you and find your thoughts and ruminations about software and development online?
So I'm at Marc Cornellà, MarCcornella at Twitter, and the same at GitHub with just M Cornellà.
Awesome. Well, it's been such a delight having you join us on Maintainable, Marc. Thanks for stopping by to talk shop and about open source, Oh My Zsh, and your.
Yeah, thank you, Robby. This was really enjoyable.
Likewise. Thank you.